You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara. Akumah Audiobooks. Chapter 1, The Beginning of the End. The hum of fluorescent lights was a constant presence in Elara's life, steady, unyielding, and as much a part of the academy as the walls that encased her. She sat at a narrow desk, the sterile environment of the classroom stretching before her. The whiteboard, almost blinding in its brightness, was filled with the usual array of pointless equations and dry lectures on history, facts and figures that felt increasingly irrelevant in a world where memory was the enemy. I shouldn't have come today. Elara's thoughts drifted as her eyes scanned the room, her gaze sliding over the identical desks filled with students who seemed just as lost as she was. Faces were devoid of expression, eyes empty, as if no one had a sense of who they were anymore. What's the point of knowing anything when all it could be erased in an instant? Her hands gripped the edges of her desk tightly. They were shaking. She hadn't fully adjusted to the schedule, the regimen, the oppression of it all. The whispers that circled among the students, the fear that clung to the air, everything was suffocating. And yet, it was hard to feel anything other than numb. You'll need to work harder on this, the teacher's voice sliced through the silence, his tone flat and emotionless as he stared over his glasses at the class. Mr. Harper was one of the few teachers who still wore his uniform with pride, who still seemed to believe in the Academy's mission to restore society by erasing memories. His lectures were always rigid, rehearsed, just another cog in the system that allowed the Academy to maintain control over everything. Elara couldn't bring herself to look at him for more than a second. She hated the way his gaze felt like a surveillance camera, always analyzing, always watching for any sign of defiance. There was no space for personal thoughts or rebellion in this place. It's all about conformity, about control. The words echoed in her mind, but the unease they brought was the only thing that kept her grounded. Her thoughts were interrupted when a small beep sounded from the communicator embedded into her desk. It was a harmless notification, just another reminder to adhere to the system, but Elara's heart skipped a beat. Her fingers hovered over the notification, almost as if afraid to press it. But her curiosity was stronger. She pressed the small button, and a tiny screen flickered to life. On it was a simple message. You are under surveillance. Stay compliant. Elara froze. Her stomach twisted into knots. She glanced around, but no one else seemed to have noticed the message. Everyone continued their silent note-taking, their heads bent toward the desk, their minds a million miles away from the reality of their situation. How long had she been under suspicion? Why now? She didn't know, but she felt the weight of the unseen eyes on her. She quickly closed the message, her hands slick with sweat. This can't go on. It's too much. Too much to ignore. The thought nagged at her, but it was quickly swallowed by the need to keep her head down. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't sure she could conform. The Academy had a way of making students feel like nothing more than pieces in a puzzle. And that was exactly how Elara had felt since the first day she arrived. The enforced conformity, the restriction of thoughts, the constant manipulation of memories, everything about this place was designed to break you down until you were a shell of who you used to be. She cast another glance at the walls of the classroom, at the clean lines and pristine surfaces. It feels like a cage. No, it is a cage. Her mind wandered as she thought back to the day she had first arrived here. The fear, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. At the time, she had believed the Academy was just another high-security school for the gifted, another place to unlock potential. But she had learned quickly that the only thing they were unlocking was your ability to forget. The Academy's objective was simple: erase the memories of the undesirable to reshape the future, to create a new generation of students who were blank slates, obedient, controllable, and malleable. I don't know how much of myself I can still remember anymore. Her heart tightened as a flash of something came to her, an image. She was standing in the middle of a bustling city square, surrounded by people whose faces she could almost picture, but not quite. It was a memory from before she arrived at the academy, before her life had been completely wiped clean. She remembered the warmth of the sun, the scent of rain on the pavement, and a fleeting feeling of happiness. The memory was so faint, so distant, but it was hers. Her hands curled into fists beneath the desk. I have to hold on to this. I have to remember. I won't let them take this from me. The bell rang, signaling the end of the class, but Elara didn't move right away. The students around her began to shuffle out of their seats, but she remained still, her mind locked in a battle between fear and defiance. Every day, she had to remind herself to survive, to exist in a place where survival itself felt like an act of rebellion. Outside the classroom, the sterile hallways awaited her, as they always did, identical to the last, with harsh lighting and a suffocating sense of order. It felt as if she were walking through the same hallway every day, despite the fact that she knew the layout by heart. Each step was calculated, every movement watched, and yet, nothing was ever truly hers. She turned down a side corridor, slipping out of the main traffic flow. Her eyes darted to the clock above the hallway door. It was almost time for her meeting with the others, the ones who whispered of the resistance, who spoke in hushed tones about the academy's true nature. She didn't know who to trust anymore, but they had come to her for a reason. Is this what I've been waiting for? The chance to fight back? It had been a slow burn, the realization that she could no longer live in a world where her memories could be erased at the whim of some faceless government official. She had heard rumors of the resistance for weeks now, others who, like her, had found pieces of themselves that they refused to let go. They were fighting back against the academy's mind-altering control. They had started leaving messages for her, slipping coded notes into the locker she'd been assigned, nudging her to take the next step. But what if they were just like the others? What if they wanted to manipulate her, too? No. I can't go back to being that scared girl who didn't trust anyone. This is my chance to take control. Elara's breath came faster as she neared the meeting spot, a hidden room beneath the academy's main building, a place that was out of view of the omnipresent surveillance cameras. She had come here many times before, but this was different. This time, she knew what she had to do. She pushed open the door, her heart racing. The room was dim, with a single light bulb hanging above the table where 3 figures were already waiting. Late again, Elara, one of them said, a smirk playing on their lips. She took a deep breath, letting her gaze linger on the people before her, the rebels who had dared to question, to resist, just as she had. This is it. This is the beginning. Let's talk, Elara said, her voice steady. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something stir within her, hope. The hidden room was small, its walls bare except for a few peeling posters that had been hastily pasted up over the years. There was an oppressive sense of secrecy in the air, like everything here was a fragile thing, a secret kept from the watchful eyes of the academy. The dim light flickered overhead as Elara stepped deeper into the room, her boots making a soft noise against the cold concrete floor. Her heart was still racing, her thoughts tangled in a whirlwind of uncertainty and resolve. The 3 figures sitting around the old wooden table turned to face her as she entered. 2 of them were familiar, Kai, a boy with dark eyes and a perpetual frown, and Lyra, a girl with short, silver hair and sharp features that always seemed to be caught in a moment of silent contemplation. The 3rd figure was new, someone Elara didn't recognize. You're late, Kai said, his voice quiet but firm, an edge of impatience in his tone. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. His gaze wasn't hostile, but there was a wariness in it, as though he was watching her every move, assessing her. Elara's gaze swept over the new person, a tall, wiry figure with a hood pulled low over their face, their features hidden in shadow. "I'm sorry," Elara said, her voice steady, though her hands still trembled from the nerves that gnawed at her insides. "I had to be sure I wasn't being followed." Lyra nodded in understanding, her eyes sharp as ever. "Better safe than sorry." She shot a glance at the newcomer, who had yet to speak. "This is Varian," Lyra continued, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and caution. "He's been working with us for a while. His contacts have information about the academy we might need." Varian's hood shifted slightly as they tilted their head, the barest hint of a smile playing on their lips. "Pleasure to meet you, Elara. I've heard a lot about you." Elara felt a surge of unease. What have they heard? She couldn't help but wonder. But she pushed the thought aside and nodded. "Nice to meet you too." Her gaze shifted to the table, where several old, crumpled papers were scattered. One sheet was covered with hastily drawn maps, the others filled with words she couldn't quite make sense of yet. She moved toward the table, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "We've been waiting for you to show up," Kai said, breaking the silence. "You've been on the Academy's radar for a while now, Elara. You need to make a choice, are you in or out?" Elara's stomach churned at the weight of the question. The choice was simple, really. In or out. But it wasn't so clear-cut. If she stayed out, she risked the Academy discovering she was involved with the Resistance, and they would erase her memories again. She couldn't even be sure if they'd leave her with any trace of herself. But if she went in, she was risking more than just her own safety. She was becoming a part of something much larger, something that might not even succeed. "What are we up against?" Elara asked, her voice calm despite the rapid pulse in her chest. She needed to know more before she could make a decision. Lyra's eyes darkened, her lips curling into a tight frown. The Academy isn't just an institution of learning. It's a machine designed to wipe people's identities and reprogram them to serve the regime. If we're going to fight back, we need to expose them, show the world what they're doing to us. Varian shifted slightly, his voice low but determined. The Academy has its fingers in every part of society. Politics, technology, the economy, they control it all. The truth about them is buried, and we need to dig it up. But the Academy won't just sit back and let that happen. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their secrets. Elara took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew everything they were saying was true. The Academy had a stranglehold on society, and every day she spent within its walls, she felt it. The people around her were like zombies, controlled by fear, by the constant surveillance, by the threat of losing their memories. It was a world where no one knew who they really were anymore, and the Academy's reach extended far beyond the confines of the school grounds. But do I have the strength to fight back? Do I have a choice? "You're right," Elara finally said, her voice steady. She looked each of them in the eye, her resolve hardening. "I don't want to live in this nightmare anymore. I want to fight back." The words felt strange on her tongue, an affirmation, a declaration of war against the system that had controlled her entire existence. The rebellion had started as a distant whisper in the back of her mind, but now it was real. She had chosen her side. Varian nodded, his expression serious. "Good. But you need to understand what you're stepping into. This isn't just about revenge or exposing the Academy. This is about taking down a system that's bigger than us, something that controls the very fabric of society." Kai leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We've got a network of contacts. People on the inside who are helping us. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and we'll be exposed." Elara felt the weight of his words. She understood. Every action would be scrutinized, every move watched by the Academy's ever-present surveillance. There was no room for mistakes. "What do we need to do first?" she asked, her voice steady. Elara pushed the papers toward her, pointing to the maps. "We've found an old communications hub hidden within the Academy's main building. It's a place where they store sensitive data, files about the erasure process, records on students, their identities, everything that proves what they're doing is wrong. We need you to help us get in there." Elara's heart raced. "Me?" she asked, incredulous. "But I'm just a student. I don't know how to hack into their systems or break through security." Elara's eyes softened. "You don't need to. You've been there longer than any of us. You know the layout, the people, the routines. You're our best chance of getting inside undetected." Varian added, "We'll provide the tools and the knowledge, but you'll have to do the rest. If you can get the data from the hub, we'll have the leverage we need to take them down." The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on Elara. She had known the Academy was corrupt, but now the full extent of its crimes was laid out before her. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every student who had ever been erased, every memory that had been stolen. She was fighting for her future, and for the future of everyone in this world. She looked up at her companions, her eyes burning with determination. "Let's do this." The tension in the room shifted. For the first time, it felt like they were no longer just a few individuals with a common goal. They were a team. A force. And for the first time, Elara felt like she wasn't alone. "We'll start planning tonight," Kai said, standing up and heading toward the door. "The sooner we strike, the better." Akumah Audiobooks. You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara. Akumah Audiobooks. Chapter 2: The Resistance Takes Shape. Elara's hands shook as she sat in the dimly lit room, the faint hum of machinery the only sound in the air. It had been 3 days since she made the decision to join the resistance, and already, everything felt different. There was a sense of weight to her actions now, an urgency she hadn't anticipated. They had made plans to infiltrate the communications hub within the Academy, but the more she learned about the Academy's inner workings, the more she realized how fragile their chances were. Every step they took could be their last. The resistance was still in its early stages. The small, hidden room she had been assigned to was nothing more than a makeshift base of operations. A few pieces of old, battered equipment were strewn about, most of it outdated and barely functional. The room smelled faintly of dust, and the only source of light was a flickering bulb that had been replaced too many times to count. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Elara ran her fingers over the worn edges of a map spread out in front of her. The Academy's main building loomed large on the page, its layout etched into her memory from years of attending school there. She knew its corridors, its stairwells, its secret passages, every hidden corner and every blind spot. The Academy was a labyrinth, designed for control and surveillance, but Elara had spent enough time there to know how to move unnoticed, how to avoid the eyes that watched her every step. If we're going to do this, she thought, we need to be careful. We need to get in and out without drawing attention. One wrong move and we're all dead. The weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on her chest. What they were about to attempt wasn't just dangerous, it was insane. Yet, there was no other option. The Academy had to be stopped. If they didn't act now, the system would continue to erase memories, reshape identities, and control the lives of countless others. No one else would fight for them. "Elara, are you with us?" Kai's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone sharper than usual. She looked up to see him standing in the doorway, his dark eyes narrowed in concern. Behind him, Elara and Varian were busy sorting through a pile of equipment, checking wires and pieces of tech that looked like they'd been scavenged from all over the city. I'm here, Elara replied, her voice more confident than she felt. She pushed the map aside, sitting up straighter. Sorry, I was just thinking. Kai walked into the room and sat down opposite her, crossing his arms as he studied her. You're thinking too much. We don't have the luxury of time. If we wait any longer, we risk getting caught before we even get a chance to act. I know, Elara muttered. It's just, this is bigger than I thought. The academy isn't just a school. It's everything. They control everything. How are we supposed to break that? We start small, Lyra said, joining the conversation as she moved closer, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. We can't overthrow them all at once. We need to expose them bit by bit, break their hold over the people. Get them to question what's happening, make them realize they've been brainwashed into accepting this system. Varian spoke up from behind them, his voice calm and steady. That's why we need the data from the communications hub. If we get our hands on the documents detailing the erasure process, the world will know what they've been doing. We'll have the proof we need. Elara nodded, feeling the familiar weight of doubt creeping in. They were all counting on her. But could she really do this? Could she navigate the Academy's security systems and break into one of its most heavily guarded areas? And even if they succeeded, what would come next? The Academy was powerful. The regime was ruthless. She wasn't sure how much longer the resistance could last, or how far she was willing to push herself for the cause. Have you considered what comes after we expose the Academy? Elara asked, her voice a little too quiet, a little too unsure. What happens when the truth gets out? We'll be marked, hunted down. The Academy won't let this go. We'll keep moving, Kai replied, his voice firm. We'll have allies, people who will help us. And we'll fight back. We don't have a choice. His words were sharp, filled with the kind of confidence Elara knew she needed to have if they were going to succeed. But inside, she was far from certain. She had been one of the Academy's most compliant students, her life shaped by their control. What if she wasn't cut out for this? What if she failed? But there was no time for doubts. The mission was set, the plan was in motion, and there was no turning back now. I'll do it, Elara said, her voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling inside her. She met Kai's gaze, then Lyra's, and finally Varian's. They all nodded in silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding between them. It was settled. They would take down the Academy one step at a time. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, the group gathered around a table cluttered with papers and equipment. A small holographic map of the Academy's grounds projected into the air, its glowing lines marking key locations and potential escape routes. Kai, who had taken on the role of strategist, pointed to various sections of the Academy on the map. We'll need to get past the security checkpoints, he said, tracing a route through the map with his finger. The outer perimeter is heavily guarded, but if we time it right, we can avoid the patrols. Elara, you'll be the one to get us inside. Elara nodded, her heart pounding at the thought of what was to come. She had been through the Academy's security systems before, knew the guards' shifts, the locations of hidden cameras, and the schedule of automated patrol drones. But this time, there would be no teachers or administrators walking the halls. No more safety nets. No more pretending that everything was normal. What about the data? Lyra asked, her voice tinged with concern. The documents we need aren't just lying around. We need to find the right files without getting caught. That's where Varian comes in, Kai said, turning to the man in the corner. He's the one who's been tracking the data we need. He'll guide you through the systems. Varian gave a brief nod, his expression unreadable. "I've hacked into their internal systems before," he said. "I know where they keep their most sensitive files. But once we're inside, we'll have to move fast. We don't have a lot of time." Elara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was ahead. She had always known the academy was a prison, but now, it felt like she was walking straight into the heart of it, ready to tear it apart. "We'll do it together," Elara said, her voice steady. "We're not just exposing the academy. We're starting a revolution." Kai gave her a sharp, approving look. "Exactly. It's more than just about us now. It's about everyone they've erased. We're doing this for them." With that, the final pieces of the plan fell into place. Elara, Kai, Lyra, and Varian, 4 people against an entire institution. It was an impossible task, but they didn't have the luxury of being afraid. The night air felt heavier than usual as Elara stood at the edge of their hideout, staring out into the darkened city. The stars above seemed dimmer than they should be, as though the sky itself had been drained of its light. The oppressive weight of the regime hung over everything, from the towering skyscrapers that loomed in the distance to the cracked, empty streets. It was a city of silence, a city of controlled thoughts. And soon, it would be a city of rebellion. Her thoughts swirled like the wind, uncertain and sharp. "What am I doing?" She had spent so many years in the academy, following the rules, keeping her head down, and believing in their lies. Now, she was preparing to destroy the very institution that had shaped every aspect of her life. But there was no choice. They couldn't wait any longer. The resistance had to act before the academy's grip became too tight to break. She could feel the others behind her, moving through the shadows, their faces set with determination. They were ready to fight. She could see it in their eyes. Kai, with his steady calmness, Lyra, with her quiet intensity, and Varian, always calculating, always 2 steps ahead. They had all chosen to walk this dangerous path with her, and Elara had no illusions about the risks they faced. But they couldn't turn back now. Not after everything they'd seen, not after everything they'd learned. "We leave at dawn," Kai's voice broke through the quiet, steady and certain. "The academy won't expect us this early. We'll move fast, get in and out before the first round of patrols. We can't afford to waste time." Elara turned to face him, nodding, though her heart felt heavy in her chest. There was no going back. "I know. I'm ready." Kai's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "We all are. We've been waiting for this." They had spent the last 2 days preparing for the mission, gathering intel, checking equipment, and making sure they were ready. Everything had been meticulously planned, but Elara knew that no amount of planning could guarantee success. The academy's security was a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving, always adapting. No matter how much they knew, there was always something they couldn't anticipate. As the first rays of dawn began to break through the darkened sky, Elara and the others made their way through the narrow alleyways of the city. The streets were empty, save for the occasional patrol drone hovering high above, its light scanning the ground below. The sound of their engines was a constant hum in the background, a reminder that the regime was always watching. "Stay low," Varian whispered as they moved quickly and silently. The map of the academy burned into their minds. "We can't afford any slip-ups." Elara's heart pounded in her chest as she followed Varian's lead, her eyes flicking to the shadows around them. They had practiced this, over and over, each step planned out with precision. But now, in the midst of the real thing, everything felt 10 times more dangerous. The academy's campus was a sprawling complex, hidden behind layers of security and surveillance. But they had found a way in, a small, unguarded service entrance at the far end of the campus. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. Once they were inside, they would need to move quickly, gather the documents, and leave before the security system could react. The air inside the academy's walls was thick with the sterile smell of disinfectant. The bright, fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Elara and the others stepped through the entrance, their footsteps echoing in the empty hall. They moved in silence, every sense alert, eyes scanning for any signs of movement. They passed through the first checkpoint without incident, the guards too busy with their morning routines to notice the intruders. Elara's mind raced, each step bringing them closer to their goal. But it was also pulling them deeper into the heart of the academy, into the lion's den. Stay focused, Elara reminded herself. We get in, we get the data, and we leave. Simple. No mistakes. As they reached the central building, the heart of the academy's operations, Kai signaled for them to stop. He had been in contact with Varian, who was already inside the system, tracing the path to the hidden data files. We're close, Varian murmured, his fingers flying over the small tablet he carried. I've got the location of the main server room. We'll need to take the west wing, but it's going to be tricky. The security is tighter there. We can handle it, Lyra said, her voice low but filled with confidence. They continued through the corridor, moving quickly but cautiously, always aware of the risk. The further they went, the more intense the pressure became. Elara's mind buzzed with thoughts of the consequences if they were caught. The academy didn't just erase memories, they erased lives. There was no room for mistakes. The stakes couldn't be higher. Finally, they reached the door to the server room, a heavy, reinforced steel door. Varian worked quickly, plugging in a small device that would bypass the security protocols. It took only seconds before the door clicked open, but to Elara, it felt like an eternity. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Inside, the room was cold and sterile, filled with rows upon rows of servers humming with life. At the far end of the room, a terminal stood, the screen blinking with a cold, impersonal glow. The documents they needed were stored here, locked away behind layers of encryption. The evidence they needed to expose the academy's crimes. Elara moved to the terminal, her fingers trembling as she typed in the access code that Varian had discovered during their earlier recon. The screen flashed as it processed the data, then suddenly, a window popped up, confirming the breach. I'm in, Elara whispered, her voice tight with adrenaline. Kai and Lyra moved into position, watching the door, ready for anything. Varian stood close by, his eyes glued to the terminal as Elara worked. Her fingers flew over the keys, her heart pounding with every passing second. Come on, Elara thought, desperation creeping in. I can't mess this up now. The file began to download, slowly at first, then faster as the data pulled from the server. But just as the last document began to transfer, a sudden, shrill alarm echoed through the hallways. The lights above them flickered and then went out, replaced by a harsh, red glow. No, Elara thought. Not now. We've been compromised, Varian said, his voice calm but urgent. We need to go, now. Before Elara could respond, the door to the server room slammed open, and two security guards rushed in, their guns drawn. Hands up, one of them shouted, his voice cold and authoritarian. The room froze in that instant, time hanging by a thread. Elara's mind raced. The files were almost done. She could feel the weight of everything they had fought for hanging in the balance. Go! Kai shouted, pushing Elara toward the exit. We'll cover you. The world exploded into chaos as the resistance members scrambled to escape. Elara's heart thundered in her chest as she grabbed the data and ran, the sound of footsteps and alarms filling her ears. The mission had just taken a turn they hadn't expected, but there was no turning back now.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 3, The Tipping Point. The morning after their escape was the quietest Elara had ever experienced. The adrenaline that had carried them through the break-in, the narrow escape from the academy, and the rush of getting the documents into safe hands had finally worn off. Now, all that remained was the heavy weight of reality. The fight was only just beginning, and the consequences of their actions loomed like an approaching storm. Elara stood by the window of their new hideout, a small, nondescript building tucked away in the forgotten corners of the city. It was safe here, for now. The walls were cracked, and the windows were dusty, but it was theirs, a sanctuary carved from the fringes of a world that had long been lost to oppression. Yet, even in the relative silence, there was a palpable tension in the air. It was the calm before the storm. Her thoughts drifted back to the academy, the sterile halls, the blank faces of her fellow students, the disembodied voices of the instructors, and the cold, unrelenting gaze of the regime. They were watching, they always were. And now, with the documents in their possession, they had an undeniable weapon, proof of the academy's crimes. But what use was a weapon if it could never be wielded? I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched. Kai's voice broke through Elara's thoughts. He was sitting at the small table in the corner, examining the data they had stolen. The documents, encrypted and scattered in a dozen different files, were crucial to their plan, but they would need to decrypt them before they could do anything with the information. They had only a few days at most before the academy would come looking for them. Elara turned her attention to him, her gaze soft but serious. The academy won't stop. Not until they get everything back. We've made a lot of noise already. Kai nodded, his jaw tightening. That's why we have to move fast. We can't wait for them to come to us. We need to get the information out. Expose them before they can stop us. I know, Elara murmured. But we don't have the resources or the connections yet. We need help, and we need a plan. Lyra entered the room, her face set with a determination that mirrored Elara's. I've been talking to some of the old contacts, people who have been working in the underground. We might have a few allies, but it's not going to be enough. We'll need more support, people who can stand with us when the time comes. Elara met Lyra's gaze, her mind racing. We have to be careful, Lyra. Trust is a rare commodity now. We can't afford to bring in anyone who isn't fully committed. They can't be scared off by the first sign of trouble. I know, Lyra replied. That's why we're starting small. We'll test the waters, see who's really willing to fight for the truth. Elara felt a wave of anxiety sweep through her chest. It had been years since she had trusted anyone outside of the academy. Trust was a luxury, a dangerous one. But it was a risk they had to take. The regime couldn't be stopped by just a handful of people. The fight required unity, courage, and unwavering determination from all corners of the resistance. We have the documents, Varian said as he walked in, his voice as calm and measured as always. But the academy will have them tracked. They'll be looking for any leaks. We need to move quickly, expose them before they even have a chance to close the net. Elara nodded, looking at the screen that displayed the encrypted files. The documents were the key to bringing the academy to its knees, but there was still so much work to do. It wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about galvanizing people, inspiring them to rise up, to join the rebellion and fight for their freedom. Have you made any progress with the decryption? She asked, her eyes focused on Varian as he sat at the computer. He glanced up, meeting her gaze with a slight frown. It's not as simple as just unlocking a few files. These are layered with heavy encryption, and the Academy's security systems are not to be taken lightly. But I'm getting closer. It will take time. We don't have time, Elara said, frustration creeping into her voice. We need those files now. The longer we wait, the more chances the Academy has to track us down. Varian exhaled sharply, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he processed her words. I know. But if we rush it, we might miss something important. We can't afford to make mistakes now. Every decision we make has to be calculated. Elara understood what he was saying. Rushing this process could mean disaster. The stakes were too high. But the weight of time was heavy on her shoulders, and she could feel it pressing down, suffocating her. While you work on the decryption, Elara said, her voice calm and pragmatic, I'll continue reaching out to the resistance groups. We need allies, people we can trust. Be careful, Elara warned. One wrong move, and the Academy will have a way in. They have eyes everywhere. I know, Elara replied, her eyes narrowing. I've done this before. But we have to take risks if we want to win. Elara knew Elara was right. They couldn't keep hiding forever. The Academy would eventually close in on them. But if they could get the truth out, if they could show the world the lies, the manipulation, the destruction of innocent lives, they might have a chance. She looked out the window again, her mind racing. The city was sprawling, filled with people who had no idea what was happening beneath the surface. People who had no idea that their memories were being erased, that their freedom was slipping away, one thought at a time. They were prisoners in their own minds, controlled by the regime, their identities stolen by the Academy. But that was going to change. They were going to change it. Elara wasn't sure how long it would take or how much they would have to sacrifice, but she knew one thing for sure, they couldn't stop now. The truth had to come out, and the rebellion had to begin. Her thoughts were interrupted as Varian finally leaned back in his chair, his face lighting up with a grim sense of accomplishment. I've cracked the first layer of encryption, he said, his voice tight with focus. The files are opening. Elara moved toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment of truth was here. She watched as the first documents began to appear on the screen, names, dates, locations, all encrypted within a web of lies and manipulation. But now, they were exposed. Now, the world would know. Good work, Elara said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Keep going. We're not stopping until the whole truth is out. Kai stepped forward, his gaze sharp as he watched the screen. This is it. We expose them, and we take down the Academy for good. Elara met his eyes, her resolve hardening. We take down the regime. For good. And with that, the resistance had officially begun. The next few days were a blur of activity and uncertainty. As Elara watched the documents unfold on the screen before her, she felt a sense of urgency tightening around her chest. Every moment mattered now. Every choice, every ally they made, could bring them closer to their goal, or get them killed. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap, something to break. Varian, working tirelessly at the computer, was the first to crack the most critical file. It was a series of coded communications between high-ranking officials within the Academy. They detailed the plans for a new, experimental version of the erasure process, one that not only erased memories but rewrote them. Entire identities could be replaced in a matter of hours, transforming a person into a completely new individual. The implications were horrifying. If the Academy succeeded in perfecting this technology, it would give them total control over the minds of every citizen, every dissenter, every free-thinking person. Elara's stomach churned as she processed the information. We can't let this happen. We can't let them get away with this. Her fingers trembled, but she steadied herself. This was why they were doing this, this was what they had to stop. The others were gathered around the table, poring over the decrypted files. Elara was on the phone with one of her contacts, trying to secure more help. Kai was pacing, the weight of their situation pressing on him just as much as it was on her. These files, Varian said, his voice a little shaky as he looked at the screen. This is bigger than we thought. The erasure process is only the beginning. They're planning something much worse. Elara's heart raced as she glanced at the screen, her mind racing with possibilities. What exactly are they planning? Varian scrolled through the pages of encrypted data, his eyes scanning the text. They're calling it the Final Reformation. If they succeed, they'll control every mind in the country. There'll be no memory of rebellion, no trace of resistance. Just conformity. And if they don't get rid of us first, they'll use us to test it. Test it on us? The thought sent a cold shiver through her spine. We're already their test subjects. Every one of us. The moment they realize we're a threat, we'll be erased. Our memories, our identities, gone. We have to stop them before they perfect it, Elara said, her voice fierce. She looked at Lyra, who was still on the phone. We need to get the word out. The world needs to know what they're planning. We can't wait any longer. Lyra nodded, hanging up the phone. I've reached out to a few trusted contacts, but they're cautious. They want proof before they take any risks. It's hard to trust anyone right now. We don't have the luxury of time, Elara said, frustration bubbling inside her. The longer we wait, the more time they have to implement their plan. We need to act now, or they'll wipe us out. All of us. We need more than just contacts, Kai said, his voice sharp. We need a movement. A real resistance. We need to unite people, get them to fight with us. But first, we need to get the proof out there. Varian paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'm still decrypting the rest of the files. We can't expose everything yet. But we can start with this. He clicked on a file and brought up a map of the Academy's inner workings. Lines crisscrossed over the campus, pinpointing secure locations, key personnel, and the laboratories where the experiments were conducted. There was even a section marked Special Projects that wasn't detailed in the rest of the files. Elara's eyes narrowed. We need to hit their supply chains, disrupt their operations. If we take out their labs, their entire process collapses. But how? Lyra asked, frowning. We don't have the manpower, the resources. We don't even have a proper hideout. We're just barely staying off their radar. Elara's mind raced. There's always a way. She looked at the map again, studying the secure locations. There had to be something they could use. Something they could infiltrate. Varian, do you have access to their communications network? Anything we can use to hack into their systems, to get them to expose themselves? Varian hesitated, his fingers still on the keyboard. I could try to hack their communications, but it's risky. If they detect anything, they'll lock everything down. They'll know exactly where we are. We don't have a choice, Elara insisted. We're already exposed. We need to force their hand. If we take out their communications, it will buy us some time. He nodded reluctantly. All right. I'll do it. But if they detect anything, we'll have minutes, not hours. Then let's make it count, Elara said. She turned to Kai and Lyra. We need to reach out to the others, the ones who are still fighting. The ones who can help us spread the message. Lyra clenched her fists. I'll make contact with the resistance groups, but it's not going to be easy. People are scared. They're afraid of getting caught. We can't let fear control us anymore, Elara said firmly. If we back down now, they win. We have to stand up. Together. With that, they got to work. Varian hacked into the Academy's communication systems while the others reached out to contacts and resistance groups. They couldn't afford to sit idly by. If they wanted to dismantle the Academy's grip on the world, they had to do it now. Elara spent the hours pacing, going over their plan in her mind again and again. The map Varian had decrypted was burned into her memory, every detail playing out like a strategy game. They had a chance. A real chance to strike back. But the cost would be high. She glanced at the clock, her thoughts darkening. How long until the Academy realizes we've escaped? How long until they come for us? She tried to push the fear from her mind, but it lingered, gnawing at her insides. The Academy was a behemoth, an unstoppable force with countless resources and surveillance systems in place to track them down. She couldn't let them win. We can't afford to lose. We can't afford to be afraid. Varian's voice broke through her thoughts. It's done, he said, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of victory. I've disrupted their communications. They'll be scrambling to fix it, but it'll buy us some time. Elara's heart skipped a beat. How much time? Maybe a few hours. They'll notice it soon, but for now, we're safe. Good. Elara turned to the others. Now we move. We need to spread the word and unite the resistance. We have to be ready when they come for us. Lyra nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. We're not running anymore. We're fighting back. Elara stood tall, her heart thumping in her chest. This was it. The tipping point. No more hiding. No more waiting. It was time to take the fight to the Academy, to expose the truth, to stop them before they could rewrite the future. They were going to make sure the world would never forget what the Academy had done. And together, they were going to bring it down, piece by piece.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 4, The Spark of Rebellion. The sun had barely risen when Elara woke up, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. Every decision, every step they had taken so far had led them to this point, this moment of uncertainty. The Academy's grip on society was still strong, and the resistance they were trying to build was fragile, barely held together by trust and desperation. But Elara couldn't afford to let fear take hold. The time for hesitation had passed. They had exposed part of the Academy's plan, and now they had to make sure the world knew the truth. She rolled out of bed, the sheets tangled around her legs, and moved toward the small, dimly lit room where the others were already gathered. Varian sat hunched over his laptop, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Kai was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room as though he expected an attack at any moment. Lyra was pacing, her brow furrowed in concentration, and Elara could feel the tension in the air like an electric current. You've been up all night, Elara said, her voice soft but steady as she entered the room. Varian didn't look up. I had to make sure the network hold, he muttered, his fingers still flying over the keys. They're scrambling, trying to figure out what happened. I've managed to slow them down, but this won't last forever. We need more time, Elara said, moving to stand next to him. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the map they had been working on, the one with the Academy's security systems and key locations. The stakes had never been higher. We're running out of time, Varian replied, his voice tinged with frustration. They'll trace it back to us soon. It's only a matter of time before they catch on. Elara's gaze shifted to Kai and Lyra, who had paused their conversation to listen. They were both silent, the weight of the situation sinking in. We can't just wait for them to come to us, Elara said, her tone firm. We need to take the fight to them. If we stay here, we'll be sitting ducks. We need to hit them where it hurts. Kai pushed off the wall, walking over to the table where the map lay. You're right. But how? The Academy's network is vast. We don't even know the full extent of their operations. Every step we take risks exposing us further. Elara nodded. We need to hit them fast, hit them hard, and disappear. Leave them confused and scrambling. Elara's eyes narrowed. This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about taking back our freedom. About showing the world what they've been hiding. Varian, she said, turning back to him, is there any way we can hack into their database? Access more information, anything that will help us expose their full operation? If we can get our hands on their most sensitive data, it'll be harder for them to deny the truth. Varian looked at her, his face tired but determined. I can try, but their security is tight. If I can breach the system again, we'll have one shot. It could trigger an alarm, and we'll have to move fast. Do it, Elara said without hesitation. We don't have a choice. Varian nodded and returned his attention to the screen, fingers moving quickly over the keys as he began working his way through the Academy's complex firewall. The tension in the room was palpable. Kai paced back and forth, his eyes darting to the screen every few seconds, as though waiting for some kind of signal. Elara stood still, arms crossed, her jaw clenched tightly. Elara's mind was racing. There were so many unknowns. How far could they go before they were caught? How many people could they save? The Academy had stolen so much already, their memories, their families, their futures. Now, they were going to take back what was rightfully theirs. They had to. Got it, Varian's voice broke through the silence, and Elara snapped back to the present. His eyes were focused on the screen, a faint smile creeping across his lips. I've cracked it. I'm in. Elara's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her composure. What do you see? Varian scrolled through the information on the screen. It's all here, every file, every report, everything. They've been planning the erasure process for years. But this... He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. This is bigger than I thought. They've been manipulating entire populations, rewriting memories to control public opinion. They've been covering up the truth for decades. How far does this go? Elara asked, leaning in closer. Varian's voice dropped to a whisper. It's not just the Academy. They've infiltrated governments, corporations. Every major institution is tied to them. This goes beyond anything we imagined. The Academy is just the tip of the iceberg. Elara's mind spun. How deep does this go? The Academy was just one part of a much larger system, a system that had been controlling everything for far longer than they realized. It wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about dismantling an entire network of oppression. We need to get this out there, Elara said, her voice hardening with resolve. We need to expose all of it, the Academy, the government, the corporations. We can't let them keep pulling the strings. We'll send everything to the media. Let the world see the truth. Elara stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. And what about the people who might be working for the Academy? The ones who are still in power? We'll deal with them when the time comes, Elara said, her voice cold. But right now, we need to focus on getting the message out. If we can shake the foundations, we can start to take them down. Varian nodded in agreement. I'll get the files ready to send out, but we'll need a secure network. The Academy won't stop until they've covered their tracks, and we can't afford to make a mistake. Elara stood tall, her mind focused. This is it. This is our chance to make a difference. No more hiding. No more running. She looked at the others, one by one, each of them determined in their own way. Elara was already making plans for the next step, Kai was preparing to rally the resistance, and Varian was securing the documents. They were a team now, united by a common cause, bound by the truth. We move tonight, Elara said, her voice steady, cutting through the tension in the room. We expose them. We send the message to every resistance group, every media outlet we can contact. We take them down, piece by piece. Kai stepped forward, a fire in his eyes. We'll do whatever it takes. Elara nodded. Together, we'll make sure the world knows who they really are. And when the world knows, there'll be no turning back. It was time to take the first real step in the rebellion. The spark had been lit, and now it was up to them to fan the flames of change. Elara could feel the weight of the moment settle over her. The Academy had taken so much, but now it was time to fight back. The revolution had begun, and they were ready to lead it. The night fell over the hidden community like a blanket, thick and suffocating. The air was heavy with anticipation, a sense of urgency weaving through every conversation, every glance exchanged between the members of the resistance. Elara stood in the center of their makeshift command center, her mind racing as the plan for their next move unfolded. They had the information, they had the will, but the road ahead was filled with danger, and there was no turning back now. Varian had spent hours ensuring the integrity of the data they'd stolen from the Academy's servers. Every line of code was meticulously checked, every file secured. It wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about doing it in a way that couldn't be erased or silenced. The Academy was a force to be reckoned with, but they had one advantage, the truth. And that was something the Academy could never fully control. "We're ready," Varian said, his voice low as he sat at his computer, fingers poised over the keys. "The files are encrypted, and I've set up a secure channel. Once we release this, there's no going back." Elara nodded, her eyes scanning the room. The walls were lined with maps, plans, and notes, evidence of the Resistance's hard work. It was a small, cramped space, barely enough to hold a dozen or so members, but it had become their home. It was here that they had planned their escape, where they had forged alliances, and where they would make their stand against the Academy. Kai moved toward the table, his brow furrowed as he ran his fingers over the map of the Academy's grounds. "Once we release this, it's only a matter of time before they come after us. We need to be ready." "We will be," Elara said, her voice steady but with an edge of resolve. "This isn't just about surviving anymore. We're going to expose them, every last one of them. And when the world knows, they won't be able to hide behind their lies." Elara joined them, her face hard with determination. "We have to move fast. Once the message gets out, the Academy will start hunting us down. We'll have to disappear before they can retaliate." Elara's mind flickered to the people they had left behind, the ones still trapped within the Academy's walls. She thought of the others like her, their memories stolen, their futures rewritten. She had to keep going for them, for everyone who had suffered at the hands of the regime. She couldn't let their pain be in vain. The quiet hum of the computer filled the room as Varian began to type in the final commands. The tension in the air was palpable. Every movement felt like it could set off a chain reaction, one that would change everything. Elara's pulse quickened as the seconds ticked by, her eyes fixed on the screen. This is it. This is where it all starts. Varian's fingers hit the final key, and a soft beep sounded from the computer. He sat back, his expression unreadable. It's done. The message is out. Elara took a deep breath, her heart hammering in her chest. She had never felt more alive. Now, we wait. They moved quickly, each member of the resistance going to their assigned tasks. Some were preparing escape routes, others were distributing supplies, and a few were reaching out to their contacts in the outside world. It wasn't just about exposing the academy, it was about building a network of allies, one that would stand firm against the regime. As the hours passed, the tension in the room only grew. The network was in motion, but would it be enough? Would the truth spread fast enough to ignite the rebellion they so desperately needed? Every moment felt like it could be the one that changed everything. Finally, as dawn began to break over the horizon, the first signs of hope appeared. A loud beep broke the silence, followed by the voice of one of their contacts on the other end of the line. "It's working." The media's picked up the story. People are starting to listen. Elara's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and excitement. This is just the beginning. But she knew there was no going back now. The academy would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. They would do whatever it took to silence the truth. And that meant Elara and her allies were in even more danger than before. Kai clenched his fists, his voice dark with resolve. They won't give up easily. We need to be prepared for retaliation. "We will be," Elara said, her voice hardening. "We'll keep pushing. We'll make sure they can't escape this. The world will know the truth." Lyra's eyes met hers. "But what if they send someone after us? What if they target our families? The people we care about?" Elara felt a pang in her chest, a sharp reminder of all they had lost. "We can't stop now. If we stop, everything we've fought for will be lost. We've already lost so much. This is our chance to take it all back." The tension in the room grew as the minutes ticked by. Every second felt like an eternity, and the silence between them was heavy with the weight of their collective fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if they couldn't stop the academy before it silenced them? What if they lost everything they had worked for? But then, Varian spoke again, his voice cutting through the doubt. "It's spreading. The truth is out there. People are starting to rise up." The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The truth was out, and now they had to ensure it couldn't be erased. "Do you think they'll be able to stop it?" Elara asked, her eyes fixed on Varian as he monitored the progress. Varian shook his head. "No. Not this time. It's too big. Too many people know now." Elara felt the smallest flicker of hope, but she didn't let it take root. This is just the beginning. There was still so much left to do. They had exposed the academy, but now they had to take down the entire system. The academy was just a cog in the machine, a tool used to control the masses. The real enemy was much bigger. "We need to prepare for what comes next," Elara said, her voice steady. "The academy will retaliate. We can't afford to be caught off guard." Lyra nodded, her face grim. "We'll be ready. We need to hit them while they're weak. While they're distracted." Elara's mind raced, formulating a plan. "There's still so much to do, but we're not alone. We have the truth on our side, and we'll fight until the end." She knew that the road ahead would be long, filled with obstacles, but she also knew that they couldn't give up. The fight for freedom had just begun, and they would stop at nothing to bring it to the people. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Elara stood tall, her resolve harder than steel. The academy's walls would crumble. And she would be the one to tear them down.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 5, The Shattered Illusion. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting a dim light over the remnants of what had once been a place of safety, of quiet rebellion, Elara stood at the window of their hidden base, her eyes scanning the vast landscape that stretched before her. The world was waking up, but she wasn't sure if it would ever be the same again. The resistance had made its first bold move, and now the Academy would surely retaliate. How much longer do we have before they find us? The weight of the question pressed down on her chest as she turned away from the window and moved back into the heart of their operations. Every member of the resistance was busy preparing for the worst. Their success in exposing the truth about the Academy's crimes had sent shockwaves through the country, but it had also made them a prime target. The Academy had eyes everywhere, and now that their secrets were out, they would do anything to silence those responsible. Varian was already at the computer, fingers flying over the keys, checking for updates on the status of their message. Elara couldn't help but notice the lines of exhaustion under his eyes. The man had been working non-stop since they'd sent the files out, ensuring that the message wouldn't be erased. He was relentless, but Elara knew it was taking a toll on him. "How's it going?" Elara asked, her voice softer than she intended. Varian didn't look up from his screen, but she could tell he was still alert. "The response is spreading faster than I expected. People are starting to demand answers. The Academy is scrambling to contain the fallout." "Good," Elara muttered under her breath. Her hands clenched into fists. "But it's not enough yet. We need to push further." They had exposed the truth, but the Academy still held power. They had to do more to ensure that the system crumbled. "Did you manage to contact the others?" Kai's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his eyes dark with concern. Elara nodded. "We've got some allies outside the city. They're ready to help when the time comes. But we have to be careful. The Academy will be watching for any signs of weakness." "We need a plan," Kai said, stepping into the room and moving towards the table where several maps of the city were spread out. "We can't just wait for them to come to us. We need to hit them first." The weight of his words settled in the room like a heavy fog. Elara glanced at Lyra, who was seated at a nearby table, reviewing their limited resources. Lyra's eyes met hers, the same silent understanding passing between them. "We're running out of time." "We'll need more intel," Elara said, her voice sharp with determination. "The Academy might have its own methods of tracking down those who've gone rogue. We need to know what we're up against." Varian sighed, finally looking up from his screen. "There's still a lot we don't know about the Academy's inner workings. But I've been trying to hack into their surveillance systems. I've gotten some access, but it's not foolproof. They're good at covering their tracks." "What's our next move?" Lyra asked, looking up from the maps, her fingers tapping the edge of the table. "We push forward," Elara said, meeting her gaze. "We need to gather more intel. We'll use whatever we can, contacts, technology, anything. But we don't have the luxury of time." They worked well as a team, each member bringing something crucial to the table. Varian with his technical expertise, Lyra with her sharp strategic mind, and Kai with his ability to see the big picture. But the weight of the mission was falling on Elara's shoulders. They were looking to her for guidance, and the pressure was becoming suffocating. As they continued discussing their plans, a soft beep from Varian's computer interrupted the flow of the conversation. He quickly stood and moved towards the screen, his expression shifting from tense concentration to alarm. "Elara," he said, his voice low. "You need to see this." Her heart skipped a beat as she moved toward the screen. A map of the city appeared, dotted with red markers indicating potential Academy facilities. The map was old, outdated, but it still held value. What made her stomach twist wasn't the map itself, but the flashing red warning that had appeared beside it. "Surveillance systems. They've detected something." Varian clicked on the alert, pulling up a set of security camera images. The faces were blurry, but Elara could make out the shapes of two people. One of them was Kai. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. Varian scrolled through the images, his brow furrowing. "It looks like you were right. They've been tracking us. They know where we are. The Academy's monitoring us, and it looks like they've just gotten a hit on Kai." Kai's face went pale. "What does that mean? Are they coming after us?" "I don't know," Varian answered. "But it's not good." Elara's mind raced as she processed the information. "They've found us. The Academy knows where we are. We need to move," she said quickly, her tone sharp with urgency. "Now. We can't afford to wait any longer." Lyra stood, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Where do we go? What's our next move?" "There's a safe house on the outskirts of the city," Varian suggested, already pulling up coordinates on the screen. "It's off the grid, hidden in plain sight. It'll be harder for them to track us there." "Good," Elara said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of panic rising in her chest. She turned to Kai and Lyra, her eyes locking onto theirs. "We move fast, we move smart. No mistakes." They didn't waste any time. Within minutes, they were gathered and prepared to leave, ready to head for the safe house that would provide them some time to regroup. As they made their way out of the base, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Academy's reach was longer than they had ever anticipated. "We're not safe anywhere." The thought echoed in her mind like a warning bell. Kai, ever the optimist, tried to offer some reassurance. "We'll get there. We'll figure it out." Elara gave him a tight smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "We don't have the luxury of figuring it out anymore, Kai. We have to act now." As they moved through the city's back alleys, avoiding the main streets and staying out of sight, Elara couldn't help but think back to the life she had once known. The life before the Academy, before everything had been shattered. How did we get here? She wondered. How did we end up fighting for survival in a world that seems bent on tearing us apart? The city was eerily quiet, and the streets felt unnaturally empty. Elara couldn't shake the feeling that the Academy was closer than ever, that they were being hunted. Her pulse quickened with every step, but she pushed the fear down, focusing instead on the task ahead. The safe house was only a few miles away, but the journey felt like an eternity. The sound of distant footsteps echoed in her ears, the fear of being caught clawing at her chest. But they made it, slipping into the hidden building just as night began to fall. Elara stood in the dimly lit room, taking a deep breath as she looked around. It was cramped, but it would have to do. For now, they were safe. But for how long? The cold, metallic door of the safe house creaked as it shut behind them. Elara stood in the dimly lit room, her eyes scanning the space that would temporarily be their refuge. The walls were bare, save for a few rusted pipes running along the ceiling and an old table in the corner stacked with abandoned crates. The space was as bleak as the rest of the world had become. There was no warmth here, only survival. Kai, still holding the map, moved to the far corner of the room, his eyes scanning the space for threats even though the threat had followed them here. Lyra, ever the calm presence in the storm, began to unpack their minimal supplies, her sharp movements betraying the anxiety she tried to mask. They were all exhausted, but the adrenaline from the close call still buzzed through Elara's veins. Varian stood in front of the door, his fingers brushing over his keyboard, his eyes darting between the device and the various surveillance footage they had retrieved before fleeing the last base. He had always been their tech expert, but now, more than ever, his role felt vital. "I don't like this," Elara said quietly, breaking the silence that had descended upon them. She leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "They're getting closer." It's only a matter of time before they find us. Varian paused in his work, his eyes flicking to her. He didn't need to ask what she meant, he already knew. They know where we are. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice. His voice was steady, but there was a layer of tension in his words that Elara couldn't ignore. We're not just running anymore, Kai spoke up from across the room. His voice was low, but there was a fire behind it. We're going to fight. We can't just keep running like rats. We've exposed their lies. Now, we need to make them pay. Elara's eyes narrowed as she glanced over at him. How? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We don't have the resources to take them down. They're too powerful, too entrenched. And they have spies everywhere. We can't trust anyone. Lyra stood up, her gaze meeting Elara's with a calm yet unyielding expression. We can trust each other. That's all we need. We're stronger than they think. We just have to be smart. A heavy silence followed her words, and for a moment, Elara felt a flicker of hope in the midst of the despair that had gripped her for so long. Lyra was right, in a way. They had made it this far, hadn't they? They'd uncovered the Academy's lies, exposed their manipulations, and freed countless minds from their control. But the cost had been high, far higher than any of them had expected. The thing is, Varian spoke up again, a frown tugging at his lips, we don't have all the pieces yet. The Academy is more organized than we thought. They're watching every movement we make. Elara turned to him. Then we need to find the missing pieces. We can't fight back until we know how they operate. Varian's fingers flew over the keyboard, and a map of the city appeared on the screen, dotted with red markers. I've been able to trace some of their facilities. The Academy has a network of hidden bases throughout the city, places where they can monitor everyone under their control. And we need to hit those places, Kai said, a grin playing at the edge of his lips. We hit them hard, disrupt their operations. We don't need to take down the entire regime at once, we start with the weak points. Elara felt a pang of hesitation. It's too dangerous. They'll retaliate, and we'll be caught in the middle. Lyra stepped forward, her expression unwavering. Elara, we have to act. We've exposed the truth. People are already beginning to question what they've been told. We need to give them a reason to fight back. Elara looked around at her friends, their faces filled with resolve. She could see the fire in their eyes, the same fire that had driven her since the beginning of this fight. But is it enough? She wondered. Can we really make a difference? I'm with you, she said, her voice a whisper of defiance. But we need to be smarter about it. We don't go in blindly. We find out what we're up against, and then we strike. Varian nodded, his fingers pausing on the keyboard. I'll keep digging, see if I can find more intel. There has to be something we're missing. Kai slapped his hand on the table. I'll round up the others. We'll get the plan ready. I'm not waiting around for them to come for us. Elara nodded, her thoughts racing as she turned toward the corner of the room. She hadn't seen it before, but now it struck her, an old crate, sitting unused, untouched since their arrival. Something about it made her uneasy. She walked over to it, her hand brushing across its weathered surface. What's this? She murmured to herself. Lyra appeared behind her, glancing down at the crate. Old supplies. We haven't had the chance to go through everything yet. Maybe there's something useful in there. Elara opened the crate, and her eyes immediately fell on a stack of old books, their spines cracked and faded with age. She pulled them out, one by one, her fingers lingering over the leather-bound cover of a book that appeared older than anything they had seen before. The pages inside were yellowed, but the text was clear, pages upon pages of notes, drawings, and calculations. "What is this?" Elara muttered, scanning the contents. She flipped through the pages, stopping at a series of notes that looked strikingly familiar. The erasure process. There it was in clear, precise writing, the methods, the failures, the successes. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "The research behind the academy. They've been working on this for decades." Elara leaned over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the book. This could be the key to stopping them. "Where did this come from?" Elara asked, her heart racing. "It must have been left behind by someone," Elara answered, her voice tense with realization. "Someone who wanted to bring it to light." The book in Elara's hands felt heavy, its significance sinking in as she held it up to the light. If they could get this into the right hands, if they could prove the Academy had been experimenting on the population for years, it could spark a nationwide rebellion. They might finally have the leverage they needed. But the more Elara thought about it, the more the weight of their next steps pressed down on her. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about ending the Academy's reign of control once and for all. "We need to get this out," Elara said, determination flaring in her chest. "We can't keep hiding. It's time to expose everything. Once we do, there's no going back." Elara nodded, her eyes meeting Elara's. "We're with you. We've come this far, and we're not stopping now." The weight of her words settled into Elara's mind, and though doubt still lingered, something else took its place: resolve. They had come too far to turn back. The time for hiding was over. They would take the fight to the Academy, no matter the cost. The first strike had been made, now, they would finish what they had started. The room fell silent, the only sound the soft hum of Varian's computer as he continued to dig for more information. Elara felt the shift inside her, the moment when fear was replaced with purpose. "This is our fight now. And we're going to win."
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 6, The Reckoning. The dim glow of the morning sun filtered through the narrow slits in the boarded-up windows, casting long shadows across the makeshift war room. Elara paced back and forth, her mind racing through the plans they had discussed the night before. They had come far, but the next move would be the most dangerous yet. Every step they took now could be their last. Her fingers absently traced the map spread out on the table in front of her, her eyes scanning the marked locations, each one a potential site of conflict, each one a potential target. She had a mission, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on her chest. The Academy had learned their names. They had seen their faces. The safe house they were hiding in wouldn't remain hidden for long. Elara sat in the corner, her eyes closed as she meditated, perhaps trying to clear her mind, to center herself for the storm they were about to face. Kai stood by the door, as always, alert and watching, his sharp eyes constantly scanning for any sign of danger. Varian was buried in his work, his fingers flying over his tablet, decoding encrypted files, looking for weaknesses in the Academy's security systems. Elara could feel the tension in the air. It was as if the entire room held its breath, waiting for the first spark to ignite the fire that would burn down the Academy's carefully constructed empire. "We need to act fast," she said, breaking the silence that had settled over them. Her voice sounded more sure now, but inside, doubts still gnawed at her. "Can we really do this? Can we defeat them?" Kai turned his head, meeting her gaze. His jaw was set in determination. "We've already taken the first step. We can't back down now." He was right. They had come too far to turn back. But Elara still couldn't shake the unease in her gut. Every choice they made from this point on would be a gamble. They had no allies in high places, no backup forces. It was just them, 4 people against an entire institution. We need to be smart about this, Elara said, standing up from her meditative position. She walked over to the map, her fingers brushing over the various marked locations. We can't just hit them blindly. We need a clear target, somewhere we can deal the most damage. Varian looked up from his tablet, a faint frown on his face. I've been digging through the Academy's comms and security. They've got more eyes on the streets now, and the underground channels are being monitored more closely than ever. But I found something. He slid the tablet toward Elara, showing her a series of coordinates and encrypted files. There's a facility, a research base located on the outskirts of the city. It's heavily guarded, but it's also where they're working on the next phase of the erasure process. Elara's heart sank as she studied the information. This could be it. If we get there, if we get the right evidence, we could expose everything. The world could finally know what they've been doing to us. The question is, Kai cut in, how do we get in? How do we even get close without them noticing? Varian leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the tablet. I've been running simulations, tracking the patrols, the security rotations. There's a narrow window of opportunity, just a few hours each night when the facility's security is slightly weaker. We can slip in, extract the data we need, and get out before anyone knows we were there. And if something goes wrong? Elara asked, her voice tight with worry. Kai's eyes met hers, his gaze unwavering. Then we make sure we don't get caught. This is the risk we take. But we've got this. Elara nodded in agreement. We've made it this far. We're not turning back now. Elara took a deep breath, the weight of their decision settling in her chest. The moment of truth was approaching, and there was no room for hesitation. They had the intel. They had the tools. What they didn't have was time. The Academy wouldn't stay silent forever. We do this tonight, Elara said, her voice firm. We'll take the risk. We'll get the evidence, and we'll bring it back. This is how we end this. Varian quickly adjusted the coordinates and began to plot their route. He scrolled through his tablet, zooming in on the facility's security systems and mapping out the most efficient escape route. The tension in the room grew thicker as they finalized the plan. Everyone knows their role, Elara continued, looking around at her team. We move quickly, we move together, and we stay out of sight. Once we have the data, we don't waste time. We leave. They all nodded, the gravity of their mission hanging in the air. You're sure about this? Varian asked, his voice quieter than usual. Once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be marked targets. We won't be able to hide anymore. Elara met his gaze, her eyes steady. I've been running from them my whole life. If we don't do this, we'll never be free. We need to expose the truth. This is the only way to end it. Kai's voice cut through the tension. And if we don't do it, they'll keep erasing us. Keep controlling us. We fight now, or we let them win? Elara placed a hand on Elara's shoulder, offering a silent moment of support. There were no more words, no more need for reassurances. Their decision had been made. The plan was simple, too simple, perhaps. But it was the best they could do with the resources they had. They had no backup, no reinforcements. It was all or nothing. As the sun sank lower, casting the room in shadows, the team made their final preparations. They gathered their gear, light armor, hacking devices, weapons, and the vital piece of technology that would allow them to breach the facility's firewalls and download the encrypted data. The air was thick with anticipation, each of them silently processing the gravity of what they were about to do. Elara found herself standing at the window, staring out into the desolate streets of the city. It had been months since she had seen the city in daylight. Now, it looked different, empty, hollowed out by fear and control. The academy had done its work well, keeping the population in check, keeping them docile. But that was about to change. We can't let them win, she thought, her heart pounding. This is our fight. Our future. A sharp knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Varian, his bag slung over his shoulder, his face grim. "Ready?" he asked. Elara nodded, her jaw set. "Let's go." They moved quickly, slipping through the narrow corridors of the building, down the stairwell, and out into the darkened streets. The city was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of patrol drones overhead. The wind carried a chill, but it was nothing compared to the coldness that had settled deep within Elara's bones. She couldn't afford to think about the risks, the dangers, or the potential cost. There was only the mission. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. "We're going to make them remember us," Elara thought. "This is our reckoning." The city streets stretched before them like a darkened maze, the cold pavement beneath their feet a stark reminder of what they were up against. Elara's breath came in quick, shallow bursts as she led the way through the alleys, her mind running over the plan one last time. They had prepared for this moment for weeks, but now that the time had come, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the reality settling over her like a suffocating fog. Each corner they turned brought them closer to the heart of the Academy's operations, but also to danger. The security was tighter than ever, and every shadow could be hiding an enemy, every whisper a threat. Elara could feel her pulse quickening, her fingers twitching at her side where her weapon rested. "Focus," she told herself. "You can't afford to slip now." Kai, always alert, was a step behind her, scanning every corner and street for signs of movement. His sharp eyes flicked from side to side, but there was no indication that anyone had noticed them yet. Lyra walked beside him, her demeanor calm and controlled, the weight of the situation not showing in her posture, though Elara knew how hard it was for her to suppress the anxiety that bubbled just beneath the surface. They all had their fears, but the one thing they had in common was determination. None of them had come this far just to back down now. Varian brought up the rear, his eyes glued to his tablet as he monitored the security feeds. His fingers moved with practiced precision, decrypting the facility's surveillance systems, searching for any vulnerabilities they could exploit. They needed an edge, and Varian was the one who would find it. "5 more blocks," Elara murmured, her voice low but steady. "Stay sharp." The group moved silently, their footsteps muffled by the dark streets. It felt like an eternity, the minutes stretching into long, tense moments as they drew closer to the facility. Elara's thoughts were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to turn back, to find another way, to avoid the risks they were about to take. But the other part of her, the part that had seen the horrors of the Academy, the part that knew they couldn't let the system continue, pushed her forward. They were so close now. Too close to stop. The facility came into view, its towering walls looming in the distance. It was a massive structure, cold and sterile, like the rest of the Academy's operations. The outer perimeter was guarded by several armed patrols, their movements synchronized in a way that made it clear they weren't dealing with amateurs. Elara's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the layout, trying to map out their best approach. Varian's voice cut through the tension. "I've got the security cameras on a loop. We've got a window of about 3 minutes before they realize something's wrong." 3 minutes? Lyra echoed, her voice barely a whisper. "That's not much time." "It's all we've got," Elara replied, her gaze fixed on the facility. "We need to make it count." With a final nod, Elara led the charge. They darted across the open space between the alley and the first security checkpoint, their bodies low and swift as they moved in perfect sync. The faint hum of the security drones overhead was the only sound that accompanied them, a constant reminder of the ever-present danger. As they reached the outer wall of the facility, Varian checked his tablet again, then tapped something on the screen. A soft click echoed in the night as the large metal door slowly creaked open. They slipped inside, entering the shadows of the facility's storage area. Elara's heart raced. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, the fear and excitement mixing into an electric current that fueled her every movement. There was no turning back now. They were in. The interior of the facility was even more sterile than Elara had imagined. White walls, bright fluorescent lights, and rows upon rows of locked doors and reinforced steel. It was as if the academy had stripped away all traces of humanity from the place. It was just an impersonal machine, one designed for one purpose: to control, to erase, to manipulate. Elara glanced over her shoulder at her team, her gaze meeting Kai's. His eyes were focused, determined, but there was a flicker of something else there, something she couldn't quite place. Fear? Doubt? She wasn't sure. They had all made sacrifices to get this far, and none of them knew if they would make it out alive. "Follow me," she whispered, leading them down a narrow corridor. The sound of their footsteps was deafening in the otherwise silent hallways, but Elara knew there was little time to waste. They had to reach the data core and extract the information they needed. Varian pulled up a map of the facility on his tablet, guiding them through the maze of hallways. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the weight of their mission. Every door they passed, every turn they made, felt like a step closer to their doom, yet they kept moving forward. "We're almost there," Varian murmured, his fingers tapping away at the tablet. "The data core is 2 floors up, just beyond the research wing." They continued on, moving faster now, their footsteps silent but purposeful. The research wing loomed ahead, its heavy doors secured with biometric scanners that would have locked them out if not for Varian's quick thinking. He had already disabled the security system, but Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air felt thicker here, charged with the electric tension of an unknown enemy ready to pounce at any moment. "Get ready," Elara whispered. "This is where it gets dangerous." The door to the research wing was reinforced, a massive slab of steel, but it was nothing that Varian couldn't handle. He quickly input a code, bypassing the security lock with ease. The door slid open, revealing the sterile, cold interior of the lab. Rows of machines lined the walls, their soft whirring and beeping filling the air. But Elara's focus wasn't on the machines. It was on the center of the room, the data core. It was housed in a large, glass-walled enclosure, surrounded by monitors and security systems that seemed to watch every movement in the room. The data they needed, the evidence that could expose the academy for what it truly was right there. But there was no time to hesitate. Elara motioned for the others to spread out, their movements swift and silent. They worked quickly, bypassing the security systems and accessing the data core, but just as Varian was about to extract the information, a sharp sound broke the stillness, a soft click, followed by the unmistakable hum of a door unlocking. "Damn it," Kai hissed. "We've got company." Elara's heart skipped a beat. No. Not now. She spun toward the door, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. But before she could make a move, the door opened fully, revealing a figure standing in the doorway, tall, imposing, and unmistakably familiar. "Rashad," Elara breathed, her heart sinking. Rashad stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the scene with a cold, calculating look. He had always been one of them, the Academy's enforcer. A man who would do whatever it took to maintain control. "Did you really think you could escape?" Rashad's voice was low, his gaze locking onto Elara. You should have stayed where you were. Elara's grip tightened on her weapon. This ends tonight. Rashad's lips curled into a small, humorless smile. We'll see about that. The room seemed to close in around them, the tension unbearable. Rashad had found them. And the clock was ticking. There's no turning back now. Fight or die.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 7, The Last Stand. The air outside was heavy with the weight of the coming storm. Elara stood at the edge of the crowd, her gaze fixed on the city beyond. For years, she had lived under the shadow of the academy, a prisoner in her own mind, erased and reprogrammed by a regime that feared free thought. But now, the regime was crumbling, and she was at the forefront of the revolution that would bring it down. The city hummed with energy, the streets filled with the sound of marching feet and the pounding of drums. The revolution was in full swing. People from all walks of life had come together, united by a single goal, to overthrow the academy and reclaim their memories. Elara had spent the past several weeks organizing, gathering allies, and rallying the masses to their cause. Now, as the final battle loomed, she could feel the weight of their hopes pressing down on her. Are you ready? Kai's voice cut through her thoughts, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Elara nodded without looking at him. I've never been more ready. He studied her for a moment, his brow furrowed in concern. This is it, Elara. No more hiding. No more second chances. We either win today or everything we've done will have been for nothing. I know, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. But we won't fail. Not this time. Kai gave her a small, reassuring smile, but she could see the doubt flickering in his eyes. He's scared too. But there was no time for fear now. They had come too far to stop. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Elara, Kai, and the rest of the resistance had spent the past few days infiltrating key locations within the academy, gathering intelligence, and sabotaging their operations. But the final strike, destroying the central data core that controlled the academy's surveillance network, would be the most difficult and perilous task of all. They would need to break into the heart of the academy, bypass its strongest defenses, and shut down its operations for good. Elara's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a loudspeaker crackling to life, its harsh tones cutting through the chaos of the crowd. This is your last warning, the voice said. Leave the area immediately, or we will use force to disperse the crowd. You have been warned. Elara's heart skipped a beat. The academy's enforcers are here. The voice on the loudspeaker continued, but Elara wasn't listening anymore. She could hear the faint sound of boots marching in the distance, the unmistakable rhythm of soldiers preparing for a confrontation. They were close. Too close. They're coming, Lyra said, her voice tense as she emerged from the crowd, her face set in grim determination. We need to move. Now. Elara nodded, her pulse quickening. It was time. The group moved swiftly, weaving through the crowd to a series of narrow alleyways that would take them to the academy's outer perimeter. The resistance had managed to secure a few escape routes, but they wouldn't have much time before the enforcers arrived in full force. Elara could already hear the distant hum of hovercrafts, their engines cutting through the night air. Stay close, Elara ordered as she took the lead, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. We don't have much time. They moved quickly, adrenaline surging through their veins. The closer they got to the academy, the more the tension in the air thickened. The streets grew quieter, the sounds of the revolution replaced by the low hum of technology and the distant sounds of combat. As they neared the facility, Elara's stomach tightened with the weight of what was to come. The data core was located deep within the Academy's central complex, a massive fortress designed to resist even the most determined of attackers. Elara knew that once they were inside, there would be no turning back. They would either succeed in their mission, or they would die trying. Varian's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got eyes on the entrance. The perimeter's still clear. But we need to move fast." "On it," Elara replied, her voice clipped with focus. The moment she reached the entrance, she motioned for Kai to take position on her left. The others spread out, ready for any unexpected obstacles. As Elara approached the entrance, she could feel the weight of the Academy's presence pressing down on her. The walls were cold and impersonal, the guards distant and efficient. But there was no fear in Elara's heart, only a burning need to destroy the system that had taken so much from her. "I've come this far," she thought, "and I'm not turning back now." The door slid open silently, the lock giving way to Varian's expert handiwork. The group slipped inside, the sterile white walls of the facility greeting them with their usual coldness. But Elara didn't pause to admire the architecture. There was no time for distractions. They moved quickly, their footsteps barely making a sound as they navigated the halls. The Academy was massive, its labyrinthine layout designed to confuse and disorient. But Elara had spent enough time in its depths to know the way. They had a map, but it was the knowledge in her head that would guide them through. As they approached the central control room, Elara could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on her. The data core was their only hope of exposing the Academy's crimes to the world, and the clock was ticking. They had to act before it was too late. But just as they reached the final corridor, an alarm blared to life, its shrill sound echoing through the halls. "Elara, we've got company." Varian's voice crackled through the comms. Elara's heart skipped a beat. "No. Not now. Move," she shouted, her voice full of urgency. "We're almost there." The group surged forward, adrenaline fueling their every step. The enforcers were closing in on them from all sides, their footsteps heavy and relentless. Elara could hear the sound of gunfire in the distance as the resistance fought to hold the line outside, but it was clear that the real battle was about to unfold within these walls. They reached the door to the central control room, but it was locked tight, a sophisticated security system preventing entry. "Varian, now!" Elara barked. Varian's fingers flew across the screen of his tablet, his face a mask of concentration. "I'm in," he said a moment later, his voice laced with tension. "But we've only got a few seconds before they catch up." The door slid open just as the first of the enforcers rounded the corner. "Go!" Elara shouted, her hand reaching for the weapon at her side. The team rushed into the control room, their movements swift and practiced. Inside, the data core sat at the center of the room, a towering mass of servers and flashing lights. Elara's heart raced as she approached the control panel, her fingers moving quickly over the keys. She had no time to waste. This was their chance to bring the Academy down for good. But just as she began to hack into the system, the door slammed open behind them. The door slammed open with a deafening clang, and Elara's pulse quickened. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears as the familiar sound of boots pounding the cold, metallic floor approached. The enforcers had arrived, just as she knew they would. The door had barely creaked open before the first soldiers stepped through, uniformed in their dark armor, weapons drawn, faces hidden behind visors. So close. "We're so close," Elara thought, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She had to get in. She couldn't afford to hesitate now. "Get to the core," she yelled over her shoulder, her voice sharp with urgency. Kai and Lyra rushed forward, weapons raised, preparing to cover their escape. The tension in the room was palpable, the seconds stretching like an eternity. Each keystroke on the terminal was one step closer to their goal, but it felt like the entire academy was closing in on them. "Varian," Elara said, gritting her teeth, "how much longer?" Varian's eyes were wide with focus, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm bypassing the last layer of security," he said, his voice tight. "It'll take a few more seconds." Outside, the unmistakable sound of more enforcers pouring into the hallways was growing louder. The room was no longer just a place of intense focus, it had become a battlefield, a ticking clock. Elara's fingers trembled as she typed. Her mind raced with a mixture of fear and resolve. They couldn't afford to be caught. They had to finish this, or all of it, every sacrifice, would have been for nothing. The data core sat there, gleaming with potential. "If we can take down this system, the Academy's hold over the people will break. We'll expose them. We'll free everyone." She could almost feel the weight of the world shifting with every keystroke, the truth about to pour out into the light. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed open. Elara spun around just as the first enforcer stepped inside. His rifle was raised, the red light from its scope glinting ominously. "Hands up," the soldier barked, his voice muffled by his helmet. Elara froze for a moment, her eyes flicking toward her team. She could see the same grim determination in their eyes, the same burning resolve. They weren't going to back down. Not now. "We don't have time for this," Elara muttered under her breath. She grabbed the nearest weapon, an energy blaster mounted to the wall, and took aim. "Move! Now," she shouted as the first shot rang out. A burst of energy hit the wall near her, sending sparks flying. The enforcer had fired, but she was already moving, her body instinctively dodging to the side. The world around her seemed to slow, and her focus sharpened. Her heart raced, and the adrenaline surged through her veins. She squeezed the trigger, and a shot rang out, striking the enforcer's chest. He crumpled to the ground with a grunt, falling lifelessly. But there were more. There were always more. Kai and Lyra were already moving to cover her. Lyra fired her weapon in quick succession, keeping the incoming soldiers at bay. Her shots were precise, taking down two more before they could even react. But Elara could see the fear in her eyes. They were outnumbered, and the enemy was closing in. "Varian!" Elara yelled, her voice fierce. "How long?" "I'm almost in." Varian called back, his hands moving frantically over the terminal. "Just a few more seconds." The enforcers were regrouping, trying to flank them. Elara's mind raced. She knew they couldn't hold out much longer. They needed to finish this, now. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps rushing toward the door. Elara's breath caught in her throat. Reinforcements. She couldn't let them be trapped. Not when they were so close. "Varian," she yelled again, her voice almost desperate now. "We need that access." "I'm in," Varian shouted, a moment later. His face lit up with a grim, determined expression as his fingers flew across the keyboard. "The data core's mine. I've got full access to the system." Elara let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Do it," she ordered. Varian's hands flew across the screen, typing furiously. The sound of keystrokes was drowned out by the sound of soldiers closing in. Elara turned back to face the door. She could feel the weight of her team's fate in the air, the uncertainty of what would happen next pressing down on her shoulders. But she couldn't stop now. Not when they were this close. The air grew thick with tension. The sound of the enforcers' boots grew louder, their shouts echoing from the hall. The control room was a small, cramped space, and they had nowhere to go. The door to the hull was the only way in or out, and it wouldn't hold much longer. Elara glanced back at the terminal. Come on, she thought. Hurry. Varian's voice was a tight whisper. It's done. The room was silent for a brief moment. Elara turned to face him, her heart pounding. What does that mean? It means the data core is offline, Varian said, his voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. The Academy's surveillance network is gone. The system's been exposed. Elara felt a surge of triumph. They did it. We did it. The truth was out. The Academy's grip on the people was slipping. The world would know what they had done. The people would rise up. This was the beginning of the end. But their victory was short-lived. The door burst open with a deafening crash, and a dozen enforcers stormed in, weapons drawn. Elara's heart skipped a beat, but there was no time to think. She dove behind a console, pulling her team to safety. Blaster fire ricocheted off the walls, and the room erupted into chaos. Stay low! Elara shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The team scrambled to their feet, taking cover as the enforcers advanced. Elara's mind raced. They'd won, but it didn't matter if they were dead before they could leave the room. Their mission was only half complete. Varian, she shouted, leaning over the console. Can you get us out of here? I'm working on it, he called back, sweat dripping down his face. His fingers were moving too fast for Elara to follow, each keystroke pulling them closer to safety. But the enforcers weren't giving up. They were moving in, pushing forward with relentless determination. One soldier, a tall, imposing figure, raised his weapon, aiming it at Elara. She froze for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. This is it. This is how it ends. But then, a loud explosion rocked the room, the force of it sending everything flying. Elara hit the floor hard, the world spinning around her. For a moment, everything was black. Then, a familiar voice echoed in her ears. Get up! It was Kai. His voice was full of urgency, his hand pulling her to her feet. She could barely process the words. The room was a blur. The smoke from the explosion still hung thick in the air. The enforcers were disoriented, but Elara could see the escape route opening. This way! Kai shouted, pulling her toward the exit.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You are listening to the Memory Erasure Academy. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Epilogue. The skies were different now. The once dominant gray clouds that had hovered over the academy for as long as anyone could remember were beginning to dissipate. For the first time in years, the sun seemed to shine with a genuine warmth, as if the world itself was breathing a sigh of relief. It wasn't a perfect dawn, there was still uncertainty, still fear, and still the shadows of what had been, but it was a start. A beginning. Elara stood at the edge of the city, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The ruins of the academy lay behind her, a reminder of everything that had been torn down. The monitors that had once watched their every move were silent now. The sensors that tracked every heartbeat were dormant. The data core that had held the truth captive was exposed for the world to see. They had done it. The Academy's grip on society was broken. People were beginning to wake up, beginning to realize that their memories, their pasts, had been manipulated. The lies were being uncovered, one by one, and the truth was spreading faster than the Academy's enforcers could stop it. But it wasn't over yet. Are you sure about this? Lyra's voice pulled Elara from her thoughts. She hadn't heard her approach, but the quiet strength in Lyra's tone was unmistakable. She, too, was gazing at the horizon, her face a mixture of exhaustion and hope. Elara nodded, her expression determined. We've made a dent, but there's still a lot of work to do. The world is waking up, but it's going to take time. The people are scared, confused. They've lived in the dark for so long. And we're going to help them find the light, Kai added, stepping up beside Lyra. His usual confidence was tempered now with a weariness that came from the long battle they had fought. We've got the power, Elara. But we can't do it alone. Elara turned to face her friends, the people who had stood by her side through every step of this journey. Each one of them had their own scars, their own stories. But together, they had become something stronger than the Academy had ever imagined. Together, we were unstoppable. I know, Elara said, her voice soft but firm. That's why we'll keep fighting. We have to help them see what's possible, show them that they don't have to live in fear anymore. She paused, her gaze drifting back to the city. In the distance, she could see the signs of change. People were gathering, sharing stories, questioning everything they had been told. The first seeds of rebellion were taking root, not in the form of violence or destruction, but in a quiet, growing understanding. The Academy had tried to erase the past, but now the truth was flooding back into the world, impossible to ignore. Do you think we'll ever be able to go back? Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elara thought for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. There was no going back. The life they had known, the Academy, the constant surveillance, the manipulations, they were gone. But that didn't mean they had to abandon everything. The world they had once known might have been destroyed, but the future was still theirs to shape. We can't go back, Elara said at last. But we can build something better. Together. Kai grinned, the faintest hint of his old energy returning. I like the sound of that. Lyra smiled, her eyes brighter than they had been in weeks. Then let's get to work. As the three of them stood there, the wind stirring the dust of the old Academy behind them, Elara felt a sense of peace settle over her. They had faced impossible odds and come out on the other side. There was still much to do, there were still battles to fight, still people to help, but they had won the most important victory of all. They had taken back their memories. They had taken back their future. And, as the sun began to rise higher in the sky, Elara knew that this was just the beginning.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Thank you for listening to Akumah Audiobooks. For more interesting stories like this, refer to channel playlist and stay tuned by subscribing. Have a nice day.